Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the nominees for Watch the Throne 2, or I think they're just calling it The Throne this time around. Now, I'm a little bit late, so 4 of our nominees have already been cut, but of the remaining, you're going to have Chunkykong, Kid, Tilde, Ryouh, Drybie, Pharaoh, Mr. E, Rimu, Mars, Luis, Candle, Umeki, Yonpi, Gorioka, Ikan, and Mezcaul, all in the running for this thing, and 4 of them are going to be nominated. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the best and worst head-to-heads that these players can find in this tournament and some reasons why you should vote for them. Really quickly, just wanted to make the correction. They're actually voting in 6 people for this event, not 4, because they're not going to be doing any open qualifiers this time around, which is definitely a topic for another time, but not this video. Let's get into our nominees now, starting off with Chunkykong. Now, I want to make the very important distinction of how kind of clarifying best matchup, worst matchup. Just because there's only one person or maybe 2 people in best matchup doesn't mean that those are the only matchups that player can win, and they're not guaranteed to lose the worst matchup. I'm just saying, if I was this player, these are the matchups that I would want the most, and these are the matchups I want the least. Fairly simple there. But for Chunkykong, his best matchup, I believe, is going to be Cola. Now, he has a winning record on Cola. They've only played once before, but it was at LMBM, which is not super recent, but recent enough for me to definitely consider. I think Chunkykong has gotten significantly better since then. You can't say the same thing about Cola as well, especially considering that he's coming into this event extremely hot. I mean, I guess by the time the event starts, he won't be coming in as extremely hot from that win at LSI number 2. But regardless, he's clearly been playing very well recently, so it wouldn't be an easy win for Chunkykong. But that long disjointed, I guess it's not disjointed, but that DK back air, F tilt, up tilt, they seem like sword moves against Roy's sword because he isn't really going to be spacing against Donkey Kong. So you're actually going to have more range as DK than you have with Roy in that matchup, which is something that's like really interesting. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, would I say Donkey Kong wins that matchup? Not necessarily, but I think it's good enough where DK, or Chunkykong rather, definitely has a chance. The exact same thing for Mudes as well, actually. One of the big flaws of Donkey Kong as the character, the big flaw of Donkey Kong as a character is going to be his disadvantage state. But the thing about Peach is her advantage state isn't that great because her mobility is so lackluster. Now, it's going to be pretty good versus Donkey Kong still because he is DK and you still do have float up air. It's not like it's going to be terrible, but it's not like the end-all be-all like it is in most matchups. And on the contrary, Donkey Kong's advantage state is really strong, especially against a character like Peach, who, again, doesn't have that great aerial mobility. You even had Mudes losing recently to, I believe it was Duplex, the Donkey Kong player. Correct me if that's wrong, though. But the point stands. If you are not playing 100% as the Peach player, which Mudes is prone to not do, DK is a character that I think is going to be hitting you harder in that disadvantage than you're hitting him, excusing the combos, of course, because obviously those Peach combos are so crazy. And for the worst matchups, you're going to have MKLeo and Shattuck. Now, I should point out that Shattuck and Chunkykong have only played once, and Shattuck did lose that one, but it was at SmashCon 2022. Shattuck has gotten so much better since then, and I just think this matchup is like awful for Donkey Kong. That corn up air is just like a literal nightmare, so obviously that's going to be a losing one. And MKLeo as well, kind of a similar thing, except Chunkykong does not have a winning record on MKLeo. Joker is just a very difficult matchup for DK. But to be fair to Chunkykong, almost every single matchup in this bracket is very difficult, and that's kind of his job, is winning difficult matchups. Next up is going to be Kid, and his best match was going to be versus either MKLeo or Light. Fairly self-explanatory for Leo. They played at Sunrise 2023, and you had Kid actually winning that set. Now, it should be noted that it was Aegis for MKLeo in that set, and I don't think it would be this time around. I feel like Joker's probably the primary character that he could play, but there's like 30 others that he, of course, could go to. And it's just going to be harder for Kid to win that second set because not only is MKLeo definitely going to be aware of Mii Brawler as a character now, maybe he wasn't before, you absolutely know the gimmicks of that character now, but he's also just going to be more comfortable on the character that he's playing. So while not impossible, he's done it before, it's definitely going to be harder. I also have Light on here though, just because I don't know if Light's going to be ready for Mii Brawler. There aren't really any Mii Brawler players anywhere, to be fair, but definitely not in America, at least that I know of, that Light would have the opportunity to play against. And Mii Brawler and Fox are similar characters, but Mii Brawler has a killing grab. So that kind of difference on the playstyle of those characters, I think maybe could catch Light off guard. Now, again, that's mainly assuming that he just doesn't really know how to fight against Brawler, gets caught off guard there. I think Light have done his homework in the matchup. He should be fine. He is the better player in terms of experience, and in those fast tempo matchups, you would expect the better player to come out on top there, but it's just always scary when you see Mii Brawler in your path, even if you are someone as fast as Fox. So I think Leo's probably the better matchup just because we've seen him do it before. But if Light isn't ready, this one is absolutely a possibility. And then his worst matchup is going to be Spargo. Fairly self-explanatory. Cloud back air literally just destroys Mii Brawler. It's like a -2, and Cloud forward is a -1. And then the rest of the characters also probably losing. Next up is going to be Tilde, and his best matchup is going to be against either Light or her. I say Light because he's actually beaten Light 2 times before in their only 2 encounters, and I actually think Falco does really well against Fox, to the point where if I had to choose a character to win it, I would slightly favor Falco. Hear me out on this one. Fox is a character that loves mashing on your shield, but Falco has up tilt. So it's just this really scary thing. A Fox is always playing in the zone that Falco wants him to play in. He wants to hit up tilt. He wants to hit down tilt. He wants a grab. God forbid he gets a grab. And Fox is a character that's going to be mashing your shield. He's going to be giving you opportunities to hit these up tilts, to hit these grabs. And comboing Fox, I think, is really easy as Falco. Edge guarding Fox is super heavy into Falco's favor. Again, it's not a matchup that is an easy win for Falco. There's still a lot of things that I think Fox is better at in the matchup, but overall, I do think it slightly edges out towards Falco, and in practice, it's been slightly edging out towards Tilde as well. And I have her on here just because I think Falco does really well against Snake. I do think that is a losing matchup for the character, but I also just think Tilde would be really good against Snake. There's just certain styles of players that are like, oh yeah, you have good item control, you have the movement to be able to beat someone of her caliber, and you also have Reflector. I didn't even think about Reflector. I was just thinking about the disadvantage thing dealing with that, but that's just like an absolute nightmare for Hurt there. So I'm going to say that Tilde definitely got a shot there. And the worst matchup is going to be Spargo. I think he's got an 0-5 record versus Spargo. 0-4 record against Spargo historically. And then I have Ryouh and Riddles there as well, because he also has an 0-3 record versus Ryouh and a really bad record versus Riddles. A 2-4 versus Riddles. So not as bad versus Riddles. So those are also bad matchups for Tilde, but I think Spargo was just like clearly the worst one. So that's what I chose. But I wanted to also mention that those are going to be struggles for him. Not impossible though. Moving on to, oh, sorry, you're not supposed to see that. It's for another video. Moving on to Ryouh. His best matchup is going to be up versus Mezcaul. And unfortunately, this is purely speculative just because he hasn't actually played anyone aside from the 2 Japanese players that are in the competition for Watch the Throne. So we really only have matchups to go off here. But Mezcaul doesn't have a good character into Diddy Kong. That's kind of like the big issue with his character choices, because he's got like 4 or 5 characters at the super top level, and none of them do good against Diddy, which is obviously a big problem here. And I also have Riddles and Shattuck here just because they also don't have really good matchups for Diddy Kong, but I think Leo's probably the worst of them. He's had the hardest time versus Tweak, but to be fair, Tweak has been raffle stomping like all 3 of these guys for quite some time now. I think Riddles is the only one in recent memory that's ever been able to get a dub on him, so maybe that's more of a Tweak thing. But if it's a Diddy Kong thing, then Ryouh, he's going to be eating with those matchups, and his worst matchup is going to be her. I think he's got like an 0-4, 0-5 record there. Not only is it just like a really bad matchup for Diddy Kong, in my opinion, but Hurt just plays it extremely well. I mean, he's the best Snake in the world. He's obviously like the last Snake player you want to fight as anyone, but especially as a Diddy player. Next up is going to be Drybie or Drybie. I'm not actually super sure how you pronounce that, but hopefully it's Drybie. If it's not, you should have spelled it with an I, man. But he's going to be a German Pichu player. I believe he also has a Brawler and Joker secondary, but Pichu is definitely going to be his primary character, so that's going to be the one that we are focusing on. And because of that, I think his best matchup is going to be into Light. Now, it should be noted that you do have Light beating Shiny Mark at LSI, and Pichu and Pikachu are different characters, but I think they're different characters in the sense that Pichu's like worse in almost every single way. Now, the Fox matchup, that isn't necessarily the truth. I think the set knockback on back air is really good for getting Fox off stage, like super far off stage, to the point where he has to side B, he has to up B certain angles, and then it's just like a field day for Pichu. That offstage gameplay is just awful for him. I think it's a really difficult match for Fox. Historically, it has been. Clearly, Light has put some time into the rats where he should be comfortable, but comfortability isn't always going to get you that dub. And I think Drybie's worst matchup is going to be up versus Hurt. You just die like instantly. You're dead to an up tilt at like 70%, and 20 of that percent you probably did to yourself. The other 50% you took from 2 grenades and the nair. Like, you're literally dying in 1 or 2 interactions from Snake, from like half of his move. Next up is going to be Pharaoh. Sorry, this was the only photo I could find. It might not even be a Pharaoh. This could just be some random guy, but we're going to assume this is Pharaoh hiding that handsome mug from us. And his best matchup is going to be up against Light. And this best matchup was actually the hardest best matchup for me to choose throughout the entirety of the video, just because there were so many people that I have to consider for this. Because Yoshi doesn't destroy any of the characters in this tournament. He's got some decent matches, but nothing incredibly dominant. And Pharaoh also doesn't have any super dominant records versus these players. So the first person that I considered was Hurt, because I think Yoshi is pretty well against Snake, but I ultimately cut Hurt just because he would have experience against like Yoshidora, Ron, Fui. He would just be way more well-versed in the matchup being from Japan than anyone in NA would. Same thing for Zachary as well. I considered Budace, I considered Cola, I considered pretty much everyone, but I ultimately landed on Light because I do think of the people at this tournament that aren't named Hurt, Fox is the best matchup for Yoshi, and I also just think that Fox is the easiest character to exploit as Yoshi, more importantly, because as the underdog, usually the way that you're going to be winning things is by exploiting your opponent, by catching them off guard, and Yoshi's got mad tricks, especially on a character like Fox, who isn't the heaviest, doesn't have the best recovery. So I think Pharaoh could pull off some crazy shenanigans if he does get to go up against Light. And there's a couple of choices for worst matchup here. I am going to go with Tweak as his worst matchup just because he has an 0-3 record there. But I also wanted to put Shattuck and Spargo just because those are really, really bad matches for Yoshi. Specifically, Cloud absolutely destroys Yoshi. So in terms of characters, I think Spargo and Shattuck are people that he would not want to see, but Tweak has beaten him 3 times before. Next up is going to be Mystery, and this is probably the player that I have the least to say about. And no offense to him, of course. I just don't have a ton to say about Lucina as a character, to be honest. I think the best matchup would likely be up versus Hurt, because I do think Lucina is pretty good versus Hurt. You actually have a big enough sword to be able to cover that Snake disadvantage. Pretty much all of her hits, I think all of her hits, except maybe Nair, are going to be knocking Snake out of that Cypher. And you're not going to be trading with grenades because you have this massively disjointed sword. And I've seen Mr. E play. He is going to be good enough to be able to space around grenades. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for him. So yeah, I think of his available matches for Lucina, Hurt is going to be his best draw, and I think his worst draw is definitely going to be Tweak. He's got a, I believe it's 1-4 record against him, or 1-5 record against Tweak. It's just super heavily in Tweak's favor, and Diddy Kong also just does really well against Lucina. So yeah, fairly cut and dry, but that's who I think Mystery is going to do good. Next up is going to be Rimu, and his best matchup is going to be either Riddles or Zachary. I chose Zachary because he's got a 3-2 record versus Zachary, and while all those sets are recent, they all are going to be Min versus Pit, so he is going to be prepared for the Pit. Now, of course, Zachary could go Rob, which I think does really, really well against Min, or he could go Joker, but we're just going to assume that he stays on Pit because that would be lame if he went to Rob. I mean, what are we talking about here? And I think Pit actually does pretty decent against Min, so it's more of a show of Rimu just being solid at the matchup and actually being able to beat Zachary instead of just like Min destroying a low-tier character. So I think Rimu's got a really good shot there, even though Zachary does win their last encounter. And for Riddles, the matchup is just miserable. We saw Dormigi versus Riddles at, I think it was Battle of BC. Now, to his credit, Dormigi is way better than Rimu. No offense to Rimu. Dormigi is just like clearly the best mid in the world by leaps and bounds, but it's still going to be the same things that Riddle has to deal with. He still has to deal with that offstage gameplay. He still has to deal with that really oppressive neutral. Can he do it? Yes. Will he do it? I don't think he will. He doesn't really have any min practice, especially on that level of Rimu, and his worst matchup is going to be up versus Hurt, which is like funnily enough because I think Snake is, or no, Min is Snake's worst matchup. I'm actually very confident that Min is Snake's worst matchup, but Hurt is just so good at it, and because you're Snake, you're a top 6 character in the game, ridiculously broken, you have a very clear win condition in Nikita, so you're never truly out of a game. You always have ways to do it, and Hurt is just amazing at that matchup. He's got such a strong record on Dormigi, and there's also going to be the other factor of the rest of the people in this bracket are all from NA. They are not going to be able to play against Min. Even if they have amazing matchups, they could all be playing Sheik, and I would still probably expect Rimu to win because they're not going to know the matchup. At least I know Hurt knows the matchup, even if it is garbage. He's put the time in, he's proven that he can win it, and I think he probably would. Next up is going to be Mars, and his best matchup is going to be up versus Hurt. I swear I don't hate Hurt or Light. Their characters just happen to do bad against the people that are trying to get into this event, but specifically for Hurt, it's the player that I'm more so worried about than the character, and I do think that Zero does pretty well against Snake. You have really precise hitboxes, and you're super nimble, so it's really hard for Snake to land that hit on you, and it's not that hard for you to land that hit on Snake, but specifically Mars as Zero, I think this is like the worst person in the entire world that you can get as a Snake player. He's just so fast and he is so precise, and he also has some of, if not the best, item control in all of Smash Ultimate. He used to be a Snake player himself, or at least like played Snake a lot, so he knows how to exploit this character in the disadvantage. He has amazing grenade control, as well as just that internal timer of when the grenades are going to be blowing up. He's got C4 awareness. He's got everything that you need in the Snake matchup, and on top of all of that, he's one of the fastest players in the world playing Zero Suit Samus. It is just not fun for any Snake main to be playing that matchup, and his worst matchup is definitely going to be going up against Tweak. This is super self-explanatory. He's got like an 0-10 record there. They played super recently at LSI. It didn't end up working out. It seems like nothing has changed. So unless he, like, I don't know, finds a magic jewel that somehow changes how he thinks about Smash Ultimate, Tweak's probably going to win that. Next up is going to be Luis, and funnily enough, I think the top 3 players in the world being Akola, Mia, and Sonics not being at this event is actually to the detriment of Luis, because I would have him at worst being 55-45 against every single one of those players. Him being the 45, of course, we still got to be reasonable here, but I think Palutena does decent in all those matchups, and I think Luis does good in all of those matchups. So yeah, that's unfortunate that those players aren't there, so I guess I'll just have to settle for the 4th best player in the world, which is going to be Hurt. Again, we're not Hurt haters here, but there's 2 big reasons of why I chose Hurt for this worst matchup. The first one is going to be Palutena. I just think Palutena does well against Snake. The disadvantage is really annoying for Snake. Moves like back air and dash attack are always oppressive, but especially oppressive against a character like Snake. And you also have a reflector. You don't really see it that much, but it matters against a character that is hucking grenades at you from across the stage. You just press down B, and now it's a projectile that you get to have. Is obviously going to be something that's good. But the other reason is going to be that Palutena is not a very common character in Japan, and I think as a region, they are weaker against fighting her. They just don't play around her win condition as well as people in NA. Now, obviously, that is going to be a huge generalization. I'm sure some people in Japan are way better than almost everyone in America at fighting Palutena, but for the most part, I think as a whole, the region is weaker against the character. I think Luis is pretty good versus Snake as well. Palutena as well. There's just a whole bunch of stars that are going to be aligning for Luis to get that dub right there. And his worst matchup is going to be up against Light. He's got like an 0-5 record there, which is pretty tough. He's also got an 0-4 record versus Tweak. So those 2 are definitely going to be tough. But genuinely, I think Luis for almost every other matchup in this tournament is like a 55-45. Just like I said, I would say he's slightly disadvantaged like he would be against Akola or Mia, but every single set, he legitimately has a chance to win, especially if he himself thinks that he can win. Luis has faith in himself. He looks like one of the best players in the world, and in an invitational style like this, especially when he's on that home turf, I think every single buff is going to be going into his favor to the point where he could absolutely take out some of these top tier names. Next up is going to be Candle. Again, Hurt is going to be her best matchup, but this one's like 1,000% her best matchup. It's not me hating on my character, just downplaying Snake. No. She beat Hurt at Riptide, as well as Olimar just doing really well against Styx. So anecdotally, she's been successful. Theoretically, she's been successful. I mean, this is just a success story against Hurt right here. And that worst matchup is going to be up against Spargo. I mean, Cloud just destroys Olimar. That Buster Sword just cuts those Pikmin like it is butter. And yeah, I guess fairly cut and dry analysis right there. Cloud's a really bad matchup, and she literally just beat her. She's going to do it again. Next up is going to be Umeki, and his best matchup is going to be up against Mudes, and that is because they played the Peach Ditto at Port Priority, and then you had Umeki coming out on top. And unfortunately, that is all I have for you, because Umeki literally doesn't have head-to-heads versus any of the other players at this event, or they're losing head-to-head, so that's going to be his best matchup going in there. And his worst matchup going in is going to be Zachary. He's going to have a 1-4 record there, so he's beaten Zachary before. Not unthinkable for him to get that dub, but he is not going to be favored there. But kind of in a similar situation to, I forget who I was saying it for. I think I was saying it for Luis, where I just think that Umeki isn't favored in any of these matches, but like 55-45, 55-45, 55-45. He could win every single one of those. He's just going to be at the slight disadvantage, except against Mudes, because, again, he won the Ditto before, which means he's the best peak player in the world, so he's probably going to do it again. Next up is going to be Yonpi. His best matchup is going to be up against Light, and his worst matchup is going to be up against her. And it's the exact same thing that I said for Drybie, except I do think that Yonpi is the best Pichu player in the world. So he's going to be more favored in every matchup that he goes into by, like, I don't know, 2-3%, let's say. But it's pretty much the exact same thing. You're still going to be dealing with the same problems with Pichu being an extremely light character, but you're still going to have the same boons of you killing someone at, like, 4. Next up is going to be Gorioka, and his best matchup is going to be up against Riddles, and this is simply just because I think this is the matchup that Joker does best in at this event. Initially, I had this actually as Cola, because I think Joker was pretty good against Roy, but Cola just beat MKLeo at LSI and looked really comfortable in that set, so I'm not going to be picking Cola. I am going to be picking Riddles, and I definitely stand on that point there, even if Riddles goes on to beat MKLeo in the next couple of days. Joker does really well against the FGC characters. Gun is just such an annoying tool. It's hard to get in against them. Terry, it is going to be a little bit easier to bridge that gap, and that's probably going to be the character that Riddles plays if he wants to win, but regardless, he's definitely going to be fighting an uphill battle against Gorioka here, and his worst matchup is going to be up against Zachary. He's got a 1-6 record or something like that. They're just really, really far into Zachary's favor. Hurt also has a pretty dominant record there with 1-4, so it's a little bit unfortunate for Gorioka that his only records that we have this event are ones that he is not doing super well in, but if he does get to go, he's going to have a lot of opportunities to get some winning head-to-heads. Next up is going to be Ikan. Sorry, the photo is so low quality, but I really liked it, and I wanted to use it. His best matchup is going to be up against Light, and fairly self-explanatory. Ryouh just does really well against Fox. Just in general, Fox is going to be struggling against those FGC characters because not only do they have the auto turnaround, but they also happen to have amazing out of shield game, especially as a character like Ryouh, where he down tilts you, does like side B, neutral special, whatever, to get you like 30%, and then you get put in the up air blender, and if you're Ostimo, at least you're dying once you get put in that up air blender. But I think Ikan is to the level where he is going to be able to hit at least close enough conversions to the point where, like at 50%, 60%, he gets hit by that up air, that down tilt, that up tilt, whatever hit Ryouh needs, he is going to be exploding. I didn't even mention how light Fox was as a character that also just adds to that kill ability of Ryouh. So yeah, obviously not a fun matchup there for Fox, and his worst matchup is going to be up against Shattuck. I don't believe he's ever played Shattuck before, but Korn just destroys FGC characters. Even though we've never seen Shattuck versus a super high level Ryouh, we've seen him versus all the other super level FGC characters, and it usually doesn't go well for the FGC player. And our final player is going to be Mezcaul. His best matchup is going to be up against either Mutace or Light. And I'm making that distinction because I think if Mutace is playing well, he should be fine. But if he's playing even a little bit iffy, this could be a scary one for him. Ridley is good enough to abuse Peach in that disadvantage state. And if you're not spacing well against Ridley, you're just going to take so much damage. Meshing up spacing against a move like side B, 30%. Back air, you're probably going to die at 80%. Like, there's so many ways that Ridley can just get that one opening engagement and actually smother Peach. That's not something that she's good at, is getting people off of her. And if Mutace isn't playing with precision, having good micro spacing, Mezcaul's going to be able to abuse that. But if Mutace is just like playing good, he should win that. And in that case scenario where Mutace isn't playing bad, I think Light is going to be the best matchup for Mezcaul, just because I think Ridley does decent against Fox. I would even go as far as to say that matchup is potentially even just because of how much stuff Ridley has off stage and in the neutral as well. Now, it's still going to be an uphill battle for Mezcaul because, number one, it's Light versus Ridley. He's beaten Smub before. He's going to be hitting you for like 80, 90%. He's going to be aware of his flowchart off stage, so it's going to be hard to edge guard him. He's not going to give it to you for free, but Ridley has the tools that make me think, okay, do you know what? I believe. Now, worst matchup, everyone else. He's a Ridley player. We got to be realistic here. He is fighting an uphill battle the second that he walks into the room. But for Mutace and Light, it's possible. I don't know. So now that we've gone over all of the nominees, we can talk about the reason that you clicked on this video. Who should you be voting for to get into the Throne 2? We've got 6 spots up for grabs, and I've got 2 lists for y'all to look at. The first one is going to be, if you want to have the highest level of competition, who would you invite? And in my opinion, you would invite Chunkykong, Mars, Gorioka, Umeki, Ryouh, and Tilde. I think these 6 players would make the event the most stacked it could possibly be. Now, would these 6 players necessarily do the best of all the nominees? I'm not so sure. Like, for example, I think Rimu would do really well at this event just because I think Lima, or rather Minmin, would absolutely farm this event. I don't know why I said Lima, but I think Minmin would just do really well in an event like this, so maybe Rimu would perform better than some of these players, but I think for the average level of competition, this would be the highest one. And the next 6 players are just going to be the people that I want. Full bias. I want Chunkykong, Mars, I want Mezcaul, I want that Ridley, and I want it bad. Tilde, Ryouh, and Luis. This is the team that I want. This is the team that I think would be the most stacked. But to be honest, there really isn't a bad choice in the running. Normally there's a player, or even 3 players, that I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't really want to see them in here. But everyone here's either got an interesting story, or they're from an underrepresented region, they play a cool character. You just have a lot of things going for literally all of the talent at this event. The Throne 2 is going to be an absolute banger. I think the first 2 people do get voted in tomorrow, so if you want to see any of these players in the event and they're in the black zone or they're just shy of that green zone getting to that top 2, be sure to vote. Links will be down below, of course, to all that Watch the Throne stuff. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the sport. It's been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below and sub while you're down there. And with all that, I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.